we have had probably not enough emerging market news on this program in the last 15 years. However, the one time we did cover the emerging market, which was China, and you're talking about the biggest class increase in the history of the world has happened in the last 4 or 5 years in China. Most of you missed it. In fact, I missed it. And look at my stock picks are up 61% last year, and they're up 30% this year. By the way, you can get those absolutely free by going to follow me on Twitter at Big Biz Radio. I put them out every Sunday. I will tell you now, I met a good friend of mine from several years ago in the investment banking business, called me up a few months ago and told me about our next guest. And when he told me about it, I thought to myself, man, if everybody heard about this, it would be an opportunity not to miss out. You missed out on Apple at 100. You missed out on China. You're not going to miss out on West Africa. Joining me today, Richard Steele. I want you to go to the website, africaisthenewchina.com. Richard, welcome to the program, brother. Good to have you in the studio.
Thank you, Sully. Thank you, Troy.
So listen, it's interesting that there's an opportunity here to invest in an emerging market that no one is talking about.
Well, there's more and more people that are starting to talk about it, and like we were talking earlier, this reminds me of 1994, 1996, 1998, and one of my first trips to China, early on, I can remember reading a research report by Lehman Brothers. Yeah. And I can remember reading that report, and after being in Beijing and Shanghai for 3-4 years, remember looking back, and you could take that report, and about every third or fourth page, there was a deal that had either gotten financed. Yeah. It was a mainland Chinese company. It was a emerging market company. It was a Baidu. It was a Focus Media. Sure. And early on, people just didn't understand it. And that's why, moving forward, especially in this new digital media age, it's important to educate people. And that's really what, if people had read what I read in the 90s and the early 2000s, they would have shoved all in on China, and they'd have just waited 6 years, regardless of what happened in 2008, and they would have looked at these regions in China and said, hey, this is a great place for us to put our money.
If you think about China, if you think about Africa in terms of GDP, you're talking about $1.6 trillion. People don't know that's a number. Like Troy says, that's a number.
That's a number.
Yeah.
Africa now rivals Russia.
Yeah.
Africa now rivals Brazil.
Sure.
At the end of the day, how does one quantify a country that is on the verge of doing a class upgrade like China did? So here we are again. So there's opportunity is what it comes down to.
Sure, and you really have to look at who's there. I mean, if you go and you can Google this. This is all public information. I mean, if you look at where the last 3 days of President Bush spent his presidency, he was at the King's Palace in Liberia. If you look at where Hillary Clinton and her Obama staff were, 6-8 weeks ago, they were at the King's Palace in Liberia. When you looked early on at Russia, China, India, any of these emerging markets, you had to look at their resources. And when you read this report, you'll see that most of this, when you look at the top GDP, of course, you see Nigeria because of all the oil and the reserves that they have.
$207 billion in GDP.
Right.
That's
and that shocks people. That shocks people.
I had no idea until I read it.
Yeah.
By the way, hold on. The report he's talking about is this report, the impact of investing in West Africa. This report's available, by the way, absolutely free. You can go contact 1-800-998-AFRICA. 1-800-998-AFRICA. Curtis and Chris, can you put that up on the screen for us there? Also, the website is africaisthenewchina.com. Tell us about the report very quickly. What can people find here?
You can find out everything, and it's important. I mean, the average investor doesn't do enough homework. The average investor has an opportunity to literally read something that will give them a complete understanding, even though it's broad-based. It'll give them a complete understanding of what's going to happen in West Africa.
I want you the first time you and I spoke on the telephone, one of the most compelling things you said to me was there was a report that came out several years back predicting China.
Exactly.
There's a similar report. So tell us that story, but then also there's another similar report now predicting Africa.
Yeah, I mean, you're starting to see it. I mean, I just spent the last 6-8 weeks, in New York, and like I said, if you pick up the phone and you talk to these guys, pick up the phone, talk to John Wellen, talk to Danny, talk to guys that have really begun educating themselves on what's happening there. There's 3 or 4 now major firms. I mean, I spent 2 solid weeks on Wall Street and meeting with firms, and for the first time, I mean, they're not talking about China. Yeah. I mean, I was just in Shanghai, Bangkok, Vietnam, and I'm telling you, a lot of those factories that used to be busy when I would drive through Guangzhou and Shenzhen, they're not busy.
Richard, do you think that that investors get the need for speed with these emerging markets? By way of example, I spent a lot of time in China in the mid-90s.
Sure.
And the USA expats that were working there that were doing very well with their businesses were saying they're getting a call every other day from another American saying, I want to come to China. And their response was, you should have been here 10 years ago.
Correct.
Yeah. The need for speed to get into these things is just sometimes missed, I think.
You know, and everybody, it's the critical part is investing early. And, you know, I mean, granted, all transactions can carry risk. But if you're in there early, you have to invest when people don't understand them. Yeah. And then when they're kicking down the doors to buy them all,
it's
you know,
too late.
That's what happens. I mean, you look at a company like Araco. You look at a company, you know, these are companies that, I mean, we've all owned 20, 30, 40, 50 $50 stocks, and if you'd looked at them 4 months earlier, they were 6 or they were 4.
Araco, by the way, stock symbol is ORAC. Araco Resources. Something that we'll be talking about in the weeks to come.
Sure.
I want to direct you to the website, by the way, AfricaIsTheNewChina.com. AfricaIsTheNewChina.com. Africa is probably a lot bigger than you think. When I tell you that Africa's GDP it rivals Brazil and Russia, $1.6 trillion. I know I got some eyebrows raising there. Also, there's a telephone number I want you to call, 800-998-AFRICA, 800-998-AFRICA. That's 800-998-2374, and you can get a copy of the report. When we're going to come back from the break, we're going to talk about specifics on what the resource play is there. Because I think the first pile of emails I'm getting in, what do we invest in there? How do we invest in these companies, and so on and so forth. You know, the interesting thing is when you have research that's been done, you have a physical presence, boots on the ground, when you can't get there. That's why you depend on research. That's why I depend on research as well. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people have to understand is that when I look, you know, people say, Sully, how do you pick stocks? Look, I may look at technical analysis, but I also look at what the word on the street is.
Right.
Because I can't get to every company, and neither can you. At 35 past the hour, Richard Steele is going to talk to us about what the play is in Western Africa. And if you want a copy of this report, all you got to do is call up 800-998-AFRICA, 800-998-2374, or go to AfricaIsTheNewChina.com. It's the Big Biz Show. Back after this.
Investors who have focused on gold have done well in the past few years, but to where are smart investors turning their focus now? Diamonds. Mining and exploration companies in West Africa are opening their doors for you to literally invest at the ground level in their current holdings and activities. Call today for free information and a complete research report on what's happening in West Africa. Call 1-800-998-AFRICA. Get the research you need today to invest for tomorrow.
From the WazillaMedia.com studios in sunny San Diego, California, on the Biz Television Network, CBS Radio Network, Armed Forces Radio Network, and Business Talk Radio Network. Big Biz Show is on the air. Let's not forget AOL Radio and Yahoo Radio. We're brought to you by Prudential. Let Prudential be your rock for retirement. Also brought to you by Bayer Advanced. Better science, better results. Starbucks Coffee, Napa Auto Parts, Han Office Furniture, Outback Steakhouse and their fine family of restaurants such as Cheeseburger in Paradise, Fleming's Steakhouse and Roy's Restaurant, and Tax Resolution Services, the nation's leading tax negotiation and mediation firm at 866-IRS-PROBLEMS, 866-477-7762, and Web Marketing Therapy. Healthy marketing equals wealthy organizations. Join our friends at webmarketingtherapy.com. Our website, bigbizshow.com. You can follow us on Twitter at BigBizRadio, and Troy Hazard's holding up a report right now called The Impact of Investing in West Africa. You can get a copy of that absolutely free just by going to AfricaIsTheNewChina.com. We'll put up a link on our website, BigBizShow.com. In fact, we'll put a banner on that right at the top there, so you can just click on that. Also, 1-800-998-AFRICA, 1-800-998-2374. With me today, Richard Steele, talking about this new emerging market. And I want to, if you're just joining us, I want to kind of reiterate here. Don't you love it when you have a chance to? Actually, let me go the other way around. Don't you hate it when you miss out on something? You know, I remember Russ T. Nails in studio. He was a frequent co-host of the program. bought Apple at 148 and then sold it when it got to 158.
He made $10.
But the point is, though, don't you hate when you miss an opportunity? We all missed China. I mean, nobody saw China coming. No. And the biggest class shift in the history of the world happened in China. And like you said earlier, Troy, when we were talking, by the time it happened, it was too late for the rest of us. Well, West Africa is one such play, and there's a lot of similarities between China and West Africa. Only the fact is we're in advance of West Africa versus China. Here talking about that today, Richard Steele. Once again, the website AfricaIsTheNewChina.com and 800-998-AFRICA. What do we invest in, Richard? It's a resource play, right?
Sure.
Resource, and it's not just one resource. We're not just talking oil. We're not just talking gold. We're not just talking diamonds. We're talking all the resources there. So let's take them big to small here. I would assume because of what I just saw here, and I had no idea. You've got Nigeria as a major oil producer, right?
Yeah, and most people don't even know that even. Nigeria, even as a major oil producer, it's also the quality of the oil. I mean, they have
sweet crude. You're
exactly this is honey crude. I mean, and literally when they call it honey crude, I mean, it comes out of the ground looking like honey. Unlike West Texas that looks like, black tar.
Yeah, right.
So
and the interesting thing too is that you've got a GDP of close to $210 billion out of Nigeria because of the oil play. Nobody would know where to invest in West Africa, and now they are on the forefront. As far as other resources there, obviously you never hear about diamonds. You always hear about gold. Talk about the diamond play there.
Well, I mean, you want to look at companies like the Harry Winstons of the world. I mean, know, if you look, a lot of people get confused. They think that West Africa is full of conflict and it's dangerous. And granted, are there parts of West Africa you don't want to go to? Sure. There's parts of San Diego I don't want to go to. There's parts of there's parts of every. I mean, I lived in Medellin, Colombia for 2 years. There's parts of Medellin I don't want to go to. But the point is you have to be there early. And when you look at you have to ask yourself, when you look at media, you have Harry Winston, you have De Beers, you have Tiffany's, you have the biggest diamond companies in the world.
And don't they own diamond mines, some of them?
They're in West Africa. And the point is do you think that these companies that are there, they would much prefer that the media speculation be it's too dangerous, don't come, or do they want everybody to be under the impression things are fine, come down here and be our competition? The diamond plays are some of the easiest in the world because, unlike gold, all gold basically comes out of the ground at 24 carats. With diamonds, you can mine, a handful of diamonds. You could have $500,000, $1 million stone in there, and that's where a lot of the value lies. And, you can look at gold in Ghana. You can look at diamonds in Sierra Leone and Liberia. You can look at oil in Nigeria. But the point is you have to educate yourself. I'm not going to tell you I don't have a crystal ball.
Sure.
But I know that if you invest in West Africa and you take the premise like we did in China that we're going to invest in 10, most of those companies are going to perform early on as droves of investors come there. And hopefully one or two of them will turn out to be home runs, the next Baidu or something like that.
Right.
But the average Joe's going to do some research on where these places are.
Sure.
Right. No, that's exactly. Gold's a pretty big play in West Africa. Not as big as oil and diamonds, but gold is a play.
Absolutely. And Ghana's got some wonderful, wonderful, wonderful gold properties that we're looking at.
I think one of the most notable things you said in the beginning is that there's this new class shift we talk about.
Sure.
It's not going to come from. Let's face it. Apple is now a digital media company. They're not a computer manufacturer. They're not a software manufacturer. Nope. They are they're bigger than Finland as far as economic structure. They're bigger than every piece of real estate in Atlanta. But that's been there, done that. Obviously, Facebook probably foretold a couple of things. Number one, there's a lot of hype in technology right now.
Absolutely.
The biggest IPO in the history of the world fell flat on its face because maybe we've been there and done that, and the business model isn't any different than any other business model in technology, at least on the web. So here we are back to the days of find a need and fill it, make something, get somebody to buy it from you, and maybe that's the new, as you said, that's the new emerging wealth. That's where new fortunes.
Well, that's where you're going to see the shift of wealth. And even though Obama talks about shifting of wealth, I mean, wealth is going to be created the way it was in the 20s, 30s, and 40s.
From stuff.
From stuff. You're
Yeah.
going to, I don't care if you go back 3,000 years and you have this much gold and you want a loaf of bread, that's a transaction.
Yeah.
So you're going to look at wealth, you're going to look at it in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. It's not going to be made in social media companies. It's not going to be made in software and hardware companies. You're going to literally have to be a DuPont and be in the chemical business. You're going to have to be a Rockefeller and be in the oil business. And you can look at West Africa and just you just go right through it. I don't care if you invest in West African telecom companies. I don't care if you look at oil companies. I mean, all of their partners are major companies anyhow. You can look at a De Beers, you can look at a De Beers at, $50, $60. You can look at a Harry Winston at $60 or $40. And then you say to yourself, where do those companies do their business? You can look at Apple and see where their suppliers come from. De Beers, a little company like Araco has done plenty of transactions with, and where do these diamonds come from?
And that brings my next question up. Before I get to that, by the way, AfricaIsTheNewChina.com. AfricaIsTheNewChina.com is the website. 800-998-AFRICA, 800-998-2374. The question is, how do we invest? How does somebody invest in West Africa? One such company, and obviously you've got to pick through your companies. And here's a terrific company, Oracle Resources, ORAC. If someone was to ask you, and I know I'm going to start getting emails here, I'm already getting emails.
Sure.
How do I invest in West Africa? It's going to be the number one question people ask us.
Do your research first and foremost. Okay, I mean, you've got to do some reading before you write a check.
Well, and then by the way, so we're holding up a report here that you can get absolutely free, Impact on Investing in West Africa. This is research that was compiled from a number of different sources. You guys put the finishing touch on this. And at the end of the day here, you've got everything about the need, about the opportunity, about the supply and the demand side on this thing.
Right.
Economic impact, social impact, environmental impact, it's all in the report. AfricaIsTheNewChina.com. Let's talk about one thing that happens in emerging markets that a lot of people don't understand is that as you invest in emerging markets, they feed on themselves. The result is exponential.
Sure.
So in other words, as money is put into place, not only are you making money from that, but there is an economic impact that goes on in the area that makes it more desirable to invest in. And it's an infinitesimal. That's what happened with China as it became more in vogue to invest in China. More money comes into China.
Correct.
More opportunities are created for the more money. All of a sudden now it's really in vogue to invest in China. The idea there is to get there before anybody else got there.
Yeah, and remember, just like in China, I mean, China, it was not just about setting up manufacturing facilities. The central government's credo was they wanted to put 1 billion people to work.
Yes.
And if you look at West Africa for the first time, whether it's putting, they don't care if these companies, if the Aracos make millions of dollars, these other companies that do business down there, they want to make sure that the locals are put to work.
Yeah.
You look at these companies, the people that you do business with are the guys that take care of the villagers, take care of the families, and help you. A rising tide lifts all boats.
Right.
And that's what's critical, is to invest and make sure that they're putting the money into the local communities.
So the local governments are behind this.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, let's talk about the infrastructure real quick.
Yeah.
So the infrastructure is obviously I'm going to say calmer than it ever has been in West Africa. Because I know that's going to be a question for some people.
Absolutely.
It is, and there's not. I can remember when I went to Medellin, Colombia 5 years ago, and I told my mom I'm going to Medellin, and she thought I was out of my mind.
Well, I think you're out of your mind because you hear the word Medellin, you get scared.
Yeah. And I told my mom, I said, Mom, you've seen way too many Miami Vice episodes. Okay,
that's exactly true.
And I can remember being in the Medellin airport. I'm getting back on a plane to JFK. I'm going through the Medellin airport, and a group of 10 investment bankers walks by me, and I all of a sudden I hear somebody yell, "Richard!" And I turned around, and it was my buddy Grant from London. And Grant turned around, and he looked at me, and he goes, "Of course you're here." And he literally, I laughed at him, and he goes, "How long have you been here?" I said, "I've been here 2 years." And he was shocked that we had already been there for 2 years. The same thing. I mean, 2 years from now, your listeners are going to be like, "Hey, look at all these West African companies."
Yeah.
The same thing happened in China. But the key is to get into them early.
Let me ask this: can we get you back next week? I think we need to do a segment.
I'll spend
on this.
some time.
And I think we not only want to spend time talking about this, in companies like ORAC. I also want to talk about the emerging market plays in general, because you are the expert on this. Let me give you the website again: AfricaIsTheNewChina.com. AfricaIsTheNewChina.com. Also 1-800-998-AFRICA, 800-998-2374. Richard, thank you so much, brother.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next week.
Thank you so much.
You want a copy of the report? Pretty simple. I'll put the link up on our website. I'll also put it out on Twitter to our 25,000 Twitter followers. AfricaIsTheNewChina.com, 800-998-AFRICA. It's the Big Biz Show.